Greetings, YouTube. I don't know if you're familiar with the actor Kirk Cameron, but besides being an actor in both television and direct DVD movies, and occasionally a big screen flick, he is also a shill for the Creationist movement. He's currently involved in a program to disseminate copies of Charles Darwin's The Origin of the Species. Except the copies that he will be disseminating have a preface. And this preface, 50 pages long I believe, is nothing more than creationist propaganda. Not about evolutionary theory, but about a mockery of evolutionary theory in the hopes, I'm assuming, of dissuading the reader from taking Darwin's work seriously. I was informed about this from a video I saw produced yesterday by a fellow YouTuber. If I can remember, I will put a link to it below so that you can go take a look at it, because he explains the situation in detail far better than I could. He's also much more personable. But I'm stunned by this on some level, a number of levels. I don't think Mr. Cameron is stupid. He's a businessman, he's an actor, he's involved in numerous different projects, public and private. He appears to be relatively bright and clever. So he either is deliberately avoiding it or is unable to understand that faith and reason do not have to collide, that they are not dichotomies. You can be a theist and still adhere to the acceptance of science. Because that's what you do with science. You accept it or you don't accept it. It isn't faith-based. Maybe he's just not comfortable with something that isn't faith-based. Maybe he's looking for a level of certainty that science is not going to give him. But I don't mind the uncertainty of science. There are things in my life which are certain. My gods, my path in life which I'm trying to improve myself on, my love for my wife and my friends. There are things that I can count on. So when it comes to the world around me, and I find something that is the best explanation for how things work, I accept it. Now, science doesn't have all the answers. I never said it does, and I never will. But it does have the answers for many, many things. And I'm sure that Mr. Cameron accepts almost all of those things without question. Surgery, eyeglasses, drugs, pesticides, cars, planes, all things brought to us by science. And I'm sure he uses all of these on a regular basis. And yet when it comes to one sticking point of evolutionary theory, people just get crazy. Because they see it as being a contradiction of their religious worldview. But science is science. Faith is faith. They are not the same thing, and they should not be confused for each other. I also think that the time scales of evolution really put people off. 100 years is a really long time to most people. Most people are not used to thinking in evolutionary or geologic scales of time. So when you say 100,000 years or 200,000 years, people's eyes just glaze over, and that just makes no sense to them. It has no meaning. They cannot fit that into their lives. So it just becomes meaningless words, symbols that have no definition. And then you start talking about millions or tens of millions of years, and it just gets worse. Another thing is that the adaptation process in evolution is really a filter. And the most effective filter in the evolutionary theory is death. And death is a negative thing in most people's minds. Most people don't accept death as a natural part of life. So since they see it as a negative, possibly the ultimate negative, they have a hard time believing that positive things, humans, other animals, plants, what have you, can develop out of a negative process, or what they view as a negative process. But really, you need to think about it as a filter. Don't think about it as death. That's what we call it. But the reality is that if you're a gazelle and you're just just too slow, you're lunch. And if you're fast enough, you're not lunch. Now, there are, of course, many examples of evolutionary theory that have nothing to do with being eaten or not being eaten. Plants are involved in all kinds of competition with each other, which has nothing to do with being consumed. Of course, they are also in competition with animals to not be consumed. They are in competition with animals to have certain parts of themselves consumed to disseminate their seeds. There's competition within ecosystems between different species that do not ever directly relate to each other, but they compete for the same resources. Evolution is an incredibly complex and wonderfully complex issue. I just wish that Kirk Cameron would take his efforts, his skill, his knowledge, his acting, and put it towards helping people, spreading knowledge, improving the world, as opposed to attempting to brainwash them, pushing an agenda that fosters scientific ignorance, all while trying to fool people into thinking he's being scientifically fair and neutral. But creationism and evolution are not equal. They have never been, they never will be. Creationism is faith, evolution is science. Do not replace one for the other.